I was in the kitchen helping clean up after Thanksgiving dinner when my niece Brittany accidentally saw my phone screen. The banking app was open, showing $17 million in my account balance. She gasped so loud she dropped the casserole dish she was holding. It shattered across the tile floor, and within seconds, the entire family was crowding into the kitchen, demanding to know if what Brittany saw was real. Their faces transformed right before my eyes. The warm holiday cheer drained away, replaced by something hungry and cold that made my stomach drop. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of someone's breathing, heavy and shocked. My son Brandon pushed through the crowd first, his face pale. Stephanie, my daughter-in-law, was right behind him, her eyes wide and fixed on my phone like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Mom," Brandon said slowly, "is that real? Did Brittany actually see $17 million? I looked around at the circle of faces. 15 family members, all staring at me like I'd suddenly become a stranger. My brother Harold stood by the refrigerator, his mouth hanging open. His wife, Patricia, had her hand pressed to her chest. Stephanie's parents were there, along with my cousins and their adult children. People I'd shared holidays with for decades. People who'd always treated me with a sort of gentle condescension, like I was sweet but simple. "Yes," I said quietly. "It's real." The room exploded with noise. Everyone started talking at once, voices overlapping in a chaotic jumble of questions and exclamations. Where did it come from? How long had I had it? Why was I still living in that tiny rental apartment? Why did I still shop at thrift stores? I raised my hand, and surprisingly, they quieted down. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe for the first time in their lives, they were actually interested in what the simple school cook had to say. "I'll explain," I said, setting my phone face down on the counter. My late husband Tom came from a family with a modest trust. When his parents passed away about 15 years ago, he inherited $200,000. We were already in our late 40s then. Tom was always good with money, and he taught me about investing. We started with small amounts back when we were in our 20s. I made $38,000 a year working in the school cafeteria. Tom made about the same as a maintenance supervisor. We lived on his salary and invested almost everything I made. I could see them doing the math in their heads, trying to figure out how a lunch latest salary could turn into millions. We bought index funds, mostly. Nothing fancy. Tom said the secret was time and patience. We never touched the principal. For 40 years, we just let it grow. Compound interest is powerful when you give it decades to work. Stephanie stepped forward, her perfectly manicured hands clasped together. "But Mom, that's incredible. Why didn't you ever tell us? Why are you still living like—" She trailed off, but I knew what she meant. Why was I still living like I was poor? "I live comfortably," I said. "I have everything I need. But you could have so much more," Stephanie pressed. "You could travel, buy a house, help your family." There it was, the word that would change everything. "Help." Harold cleared his throat. "Daisy, I don't want to be inappropriate, but you know Brittany is in medical school. The debt is crushing, $80,000 and climbing. If you have this kind of money, I could help." His wife Patricia finished for him. "Our son's business failed last year. Hez trying to start over, but without capital, it's impossible." My nephew Justin, who I maybe saw twice a year, suddenly spoke up. "Grandma Daisy, I've been looking at houses. The down payment is killing me. Even 20 or 30,000 would change my life." They kept going, one after another, each person suddenly remembering their financial struggles, their needs, their dreams that required money. My money. But it was Stephanie who delivered the line that made my blood run cold. She smiled, that bright smile she used at her real estate job, and said, "Well, now you don't need to co-sign anything or worry about loans. You can just give us what we need. Family helps family, right?" She looked around at the others, gathering support. "I mean, that's what family does. We take care of each other." The murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. The word give hung in the air, and I noticed she hadn't said loan or borrow. She said give. I looked at Brandon, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, to tell his wife that my money was my own. But he just stood there, his eyes on the floor, his jaw tight. "I need to think about this," I said quietly, picking up my phone and sliding it into my cardigan pocket. "This is a lot to process." "Of course," Stephanie said quickly, but her smile was strained. "We're not asking you to decide anything right now. We're just saying, you have the ability to really change lives, your family's lives." I nodded and excused myself to the bathroom. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the lock on the door. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and pressed my palms against my eyes. 40 years. 40 years of bringing my lunch to work in a paper bag. 40 years of buying clothes at garage sales and cutting coupons and saying no to vacations. Tom and I had lived modestly, not because we were poor, but because we had a plan. We wanted security. We wanted freedom in our old age. We wanted to make our own choices about how our money would be used. And in less than 10 minutes, my family had decided they deserved it more than I did. 3 days after Thanksgiving, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. It already received a dozen text messages before I even finished my morning coffee. Harold sent me a breakdown of Brittany's medical school costs, itemized by semester. Patricia texted me links to small business loans with interest rates, suggesting I could do better than the banks. Justin sent me listings for houses in his price range, with notes about how far a down payment would go. But it was the message from Stephanie that made my chest tighten. "Mom, can you come over Saturday at 2? We've organized a family discussion. Everyone wants to talk about the best way to handle your financial situation." My financial situation? As if I were the one with a problem. Saturday arrived gray and cold, typical Ohio November weather. I drove to Brandon and Stephanie's house in my 12-year-old sedan, my stomach churning with dread. Their house sat in a nice suburban development, a 4-bedroom colonial worth about $500,000. The mortgage payment alone was probably more than my monthly rent. When I walked in, I found them arranged in a semicircle in the living room. It looked like an intervention. Harold and Patricia sat on the love seat. Brandon and Stephanie were on the main couch. My cousin Dennis, who I barely knew, sat in the armchair. Justin perched on the ottoman. All eyes turned to me as I entered. "Hi, Mom," Brandon said, his voice falsely cheerful. "Thanks for coming." Stephanie stood up, holding a laptop. "We wanted to talk to you about something important. We've been doing some research, and we think we've come up with a fair plan." She opened the laptop and connected it to their television. A PowerPoint presentation appeared on the screen. The title slide read, "Fair Distribution Plan for Family Wealth." My heart sank. For the next 20 minutes, they walked me through their plan. They'd divided my $17 million into portions. According to their calculations, I didn't need more than $1 million for myself. That would give me an income of $40,000 a year if I followed the 4% withdrawal rule, they explained. That was more than I'd made as a lunch lady, so surely it would be enough. The remaining $16 million, they decided, should be redistributed to family members who can use it. Harold would get $200,000 for Brittany's medical school. Patricia's son would get $150,000 for his business. Brandon and Stephanie needed $300,000 to pay off their mortgage and do renovations. Dennis needed $50,000 for credit card debt had racked up. Justin wanted a down payment. There were others too, cousins I hadn't seen in years, all with their hands out. "We know this seems like a lot to take in," Stephanie said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "But we've really thought this through. You're 63 years old. You're already retired. You don't have the expenses we do. You don't have children to put through college or mortgages to pay. You've always lived simply anyway. Why change now? We've included you in every holiday," Patricia added. "Every birthday party, every celebration. We're your only family, Daisy. Where else would that money go?" I sat there, unable to speak, watching them divvy up my life's work like it was a pie at a potluck. Brandon finally spoke. "Mom, I know this is overwhelming, but think about what you could do for us, for your grandchildren, for the family. Your grandchildren have a college fund," I said quietly. "You and Stephanie told me that yourselves." "Well, yes," Stephanie said quickly. "But it's small. With your help, we could send them to the best schools. We could give them opportunities. You could give yourselves a bigger house and nicer vacations," I said, my voice steadier now. That's what this is really about." The room went silent. Stephanie's smile faltered. "Mom, that's not fair," Brandon said. "We're struggling. The mortgage is expensive. Property taxes went up. Everything costs more now. You chose a $500,000 house," I said. "You chose granite countertops and hardwood floors. Those were your choices." "Yes, because we thought we'd have help," Stephanie snapped, her mask slipping. "Normal parents help their adult children. Normal grandparents want to see their family thrive. Normal," there was that word, as if I were abnormal for wanting to keep what I'd spent 40 years building. Harold leaned forward. "Daisy, be reasonable. You're getting older. Managing this much money, it's complicated. It could be confusing for someone at your age." "I'm 63, not 90, I said. "Still," Stephanie interjected, pulling out a folder. "We've actually consulted with a lawyer about elder financial management. Just to understand the options." The room tilted. "What?" "Don't be upset," Stephanie said, her voice sugary sweet again. "We just want to help you." The lawyer explained that if someone is deemed unable to manage large assets, family members can petition for a conservatorship. It's actually a very caring thing to do. We'd handle all the stress of managing the money, and you just receive what you need. We'd take care of everything. We'd take care of you, Patricia echoed. Brandon wouldn't look at me. Harold nodded along, like this was perfectly reasonable. They'd researched how to take my money legally. They'd consulted lawyers about declaring me incompetent, and they were presenting it as love. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. "I need to go." "Mom, don't be like this," Brandon said. "We're trying to help." "No," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're trying to rob me." I walked out while they called after me, their voices a chorus of justifications and protests. I got in my car and drove home with tears streaming down my face, but by the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, the tears had stopped. Something else had taken their place, something cold and clear and determined. If they wanted to play games with my money, they were about to learn who they were dealing with. 1 week later, I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking chamomile tea when the email arrived. The subject line read, "Family Financial Agreement, please sign." My hands trembled as I opened the attachment. It was a legal document, professionally formatted, clearly drafted by an actual attorney. The document requested that I transfer $12 million immediately into a family trust. Brandon, Stephanie, and Harold were named as trustees. In exchange, I would receive a monthly allowance of $3,000 deposited directly into my account. An allowance, like a child. The email, sent from Stephanie's account, included a cheerful note. "Hi, Mom. We had this drawn up to make everything official and fair. Once you sign, we can get started helping everyone. The lawyer is available to notarize this week. Let us know what day works for you. Love, Stephanie." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I picked up my phone and called Martha. Martha Thompson had been a lawyer for 42 years before retiring. We'd worked together at the school where she volunteered as a reading tutor after leaving her practice. She'd become one of my closest friends, someone I actually trusted. "Daisy," she answered on the second ring. "Everything okay? Can you come over?" I asked. "I need legal advice." She was at my door within an hour. Martha read the email and the attached document, her expression growing darker with each paragraph. When she finished, she set down her reading glasses and looked at me with a mixture of anger and concern. "This is financial exploitation," she said flatly. "This document is legally binding if you sign it. You'd be signing away control of your assets to people who are not acting in your best interest." "Can they really do this?" I asked. "The conservatorship thing." "Not easily," Martha said. "They'd have to prove you're mentally incompetent or unable to make sound financial decisions. That requires medical evaluations, court hearings, substantial evidence. It's not something they can just file for and get approved, but they're trying to scare me into signing this instead." "Exactly." Martha pulled out her laptop. "Let me check something." She logged into my bank's website, using my information with my permission. What we found made my blood run cold. Someone had attempted to log into my accounts 6 times over the past week. All attempts had failed because of two-factor authentication, but the attempts had been made. Martha traced the IP address. It came from Brandon and Stephanie's house. They're trying to access your money directly, Martha said. Daisy, this is serious. This crosses the line into potential fraud. I felt sick. What do I do? First, we secure everything. New passwords, new security questions, maybe even move your assets to a different bank. Second, we document everything. Save every email, every text, every voicemail. And third, she looked at me seriously. You need to know the truth about what they're planning. What do you mean? I mean, we need to find out how deep this goes. That evening, I drove to Brandon's house unannounced. Id called first, but no one answered, which was suspicious because both their cars were in the driveway. I used the key they'd given me years ago for emergencies and let myself in quietly. I could hear voices in the dining room. I walked softly down the hall and stopped just outside the doorway, out of sight. My lawyer says if we can prove she's always been forgetful, it's easy, Harold was saying. We just need documentation. Anyone who can testify that she's been declining. I can do that, Patricia said. He'll say she's repeated stories, forgotten conversations. It's not even really lying. Old people do that. Once we get conservatorship, we can sell her apartment, move her into assisted living, and have full control of everything. That was Stephanie's voice, cold and calculating. The lawyer said the court usually sides with family who seem concerned. I feel bad, Brandon said, and my heart seized. Maybe my son still had a conscience, but she doesn't need that money. We do. Our kids need opportunities. Good schools, sports, travel. She already had her life. She was always just a lunch lady. Patricia again. She doesn't understand wealth. We're actually doing her a favor, managing it properly. I stepped into the doorway. I understand more than you think. The silence was absolute. 4 faces turned toward me, shock and horror written across them. File folders covered the dining room table. I could see old family photos spread out, papers with notes scrawled on them. Stephanie recovered first, her smile snapping into place like a mask. Mom! We didn't hear you come in. We were just discussing how to help you manage everything. By declaring me incompetent, I said quietly. By taking over my life. You don't understand, Harold sputtered. We're trying to protect you. From what? My own money. Brandon stood up, his face flushed. You don't understand the pressure we're under. The mortgage, the kids' activities, keeping up with everything. You had it easy. You just served lunch and went home. The words hit me like a slap. 40 years of waking up at 5 in the morning to prepare food for hundreds of children. 40 years of standing on concrete floors until my feet ached. 40 years of making sure hungry kids got fed, sometimes out of my own pocket when their lunch accounts were empty. Easy. I understand that I raised a son who would betray his own mother for money, I said, my voice shaking. I understand that every one of you sees me as too stupid to deserve what I worked for. That's not what we said, Patricia protested. It's exactly what you said. I heard you. You think I'm just a lunch lady who doesn't understand wealth. I looked at the files on the table. What's all this? No one answered. I walked over and picked up a folder. Inside were printouts of my medical records, somehow obtained, notes about my age, my retirement, my limited education, character assessments written by people I'd trusted, all building a case that I was incompetent. You've been building a file on me, I said. Planning this. For how long? Still silence. I'm hiring my own lawyer, I said. And you're going to regret every single thing you've done. I turned and walked out, leaving them stammering excuses behind me, but I didn't cry, not this time, because now I knew exactly who I was dealing with, and I was going to make sure they understood who they were dealing with too. For the next 2 weeks, I became someone I'd never been before. Strategic, calculating, 10 steps ahead. Martha introduced me to Gerald Whitmore, a financial attorney who specialized in estate planning and elder law. Gerald was in his 50s, sharp as a tack, and when I told him my story, his face hardened with professional anger. This is textbook financial exploitation, he said, and the attempted account access is attempted fraud. You have options, Daisy. We spent hours securing everything. Gerald helped me move my assets to a different bank with military-grade security measures. We set up a living trust with ironclad protections. I named Martha as my healthcare proxy and financial power of attorney, removing any possibility of my family claiming control. Every document was witnessed, notarized, and legally bulletproof, but I didn't stop there. I want to know the truth about their finances, I told Gerald. If they're really struggling like they claim. He recommended a private investigator named Laura Chen. No, wait, I can't use that name. Laura Sullivan. She was a former accountant who now helped people in situations like mine. What she uncovered made everything clear. Brandon and Stephanie weren't struggling at all. They had over $200,000 in savings accounts. Their mortgage was manageable. They wanted my money not to survive, but to upgrade. They'd been looking at vacation homes in Florida, boats, luxury cars. They wanted to live a lifestyle they hadn't earned. Harold's gambling problem was worse than anyone knew. He'd lost $63,000 at casinos in the past 2 years. Brittany's medical school was actually paid for through scholarships and a grant program. She didn't have $80,000 in debt. She had $12,000, manageable by any standard. Harold wanted my money to cover his gambling losses. Patricia's son hadn't just failed in business. He'd embezzled from investors and barely avoided criminal charges. He was legally barred from starting another business in our state without supervision. Patricia wanted my money to pay off his debts and fund another venture that would likely be fraudulent. Every single one of them had lied to me. It'd also been doing something else, something Martha suggested. In our state, recording phone conversations is legal with one-party consent. That meant, as long as I was part of the conversation, I could record it. So I did. Every phone call where they demanded money, every voicemail where they pressured me, every text message where they calculated their share. I saved everything. Martha had also photographed the PowerPoint presentation on their television screen with my permission. We had copies of the legal document they'd tried to make me sign. We had records of the attempted account logins. We had witness statements from Martha about their conservatorship scheme. I had an arsenal. Now I just needed the right moment to deploy it. That moment came when I sent a group text to all of them. I've thought about your proposal. Let's meet at Brandon's house next Saturday at 2 in the afternoon. I'm ready to discuss distribution. The responses came within minutes. That meant as long as I was part of the conversation, I could record it. So I did. Every phone call where they demanded money, every voicemail where they pressured me, every text message where they calculated their share. I saved everything. Martha had also photographed the PowerPoint presentation on their television screen with my permission. We had copies of the legal document they'd tried to make me sign. We had records of the attempted account logins. We had witness statements from Martha about their conservatorship scheme. I had an arsenal. Now I just needed the right moment to deploy it. That moment came when I sent a group text to all of them. I've thought about your proposal. Let's meet at Brandon's house next Saturday at 2 in the afternoon. I'm ready to discuss distribution. The responses came within minutes. They were already celebrating. Brandon stood up when I entered. Mom, thank you for being open to this. We really think it's the best solution for everyone. I'm sure you do, I said calmly. I set my purse down and opened it, pulling out a small device. Before we begin, I need to show you all something. I connected my laptop to their television, just like Stephanie had done weeks before, but my presentation was very different. I'm not here to give you money, I said, my voice steady and clear. I'm here to show you who I really am, and who you are. The first slide appeared on the screen. It was a timeline documenting every attempt to access my bank accounts, complete with IP addresses and timestamps, all traced to this house. Someone in this room tried to hack into my accounts 6 times, I said. That's attempted fraud. Brandon and Stephanie's faces went white. Harold shifted uncomfortably. I clicked to the next slide. Security camera footage from the coffee shop where Ed met Patricia 2 weeks ago. Audio played through the television speakers, her voice, clear as day. If we can just get her declared incompetent, we can control everything. It's not even that hard these days. Patricia jumped up. You recorded me? That's illegal. Actually, it's not, Gerald said, speaking for the first time. Ohio is a one-party consent state. If Daisy is part of the conversation, she can record it. I kept clicking through slides, recorded phone conversations where they pressured me for money, text messages where they calculated their shares, emails discussing how to handle me, and then, the piece that made several of them gasp, the private investigators' reports. Brandon and Stephanie, you have $200,000 in savings. Your mortgage payment is well within your means. You're not struggling, you're greedy. I turned to Harold. You don't need money for Brittany's medical school. You need it to cover your $63,000 in gambling debts. Harold's face turned purple. How dare you invade my privacy? How dare you lie to me about your daughter to manipulate me into giving you money? I shot back. I looked at Patricia. Your son is legally barred from starting a business in this state because he embezzled from investors. You wanted my money to fund another scam. The room exploded. Everyone started shouting at once. Stephanie yelled about invasion of privacy. Harold roared about disrespect. Patricia tried to leave, but Martha stood in front of the door, arms crossed. I raised my voice over the chaos. I'm not done. Silence fell again, shocked and hostile. You saw a lonely old lunch lady with money and decided I was too stupid to keep it. You researched how to steal from me legally. You were willing to have me declared incompetent and locked away to get what you wanted. You built files on me. You lied about your situations. You tried to hack my accounts. And you did all of this while pretending you loved me. I looked at Brandon, my heart breaking. Not one of you asked how I was doing, what my dreams were, what I wanted from life. You just wanted what was mine. Mom, Brandon started, his voice weak. Don't. I held up my hand. Gerald, explain their options. Gerald stepped forward, professional and cold. You have two choices. Option 1. Daisy reports your attempted fraud and conservatorship scheme to the authorities. You'll face legal consequences. Option 2. You sign documents acknowledging your actions, agree to a no-contact order for a minimum of 2 years, and accept that you're permanently removed from any inheritance considerations. Choose now. You could have heard a pin drop. One by one, they chose option 2. What else could they do? Gerald had brought the documents. Each person had to sign an acknowledgement of what they'd done. Each person had to agree to stay away from me. Patricia refused at first. She stood up, pointing her finger at me. You're a selfish old woman. What's the point of having money if you don't share it with family? Sharing is voluntary, I said quietly. Stealing is not. And Gerald, please note that Patricia refused to sign. Noted, Gerald said. Well, proceed with option 1 for her. Patricia's face went slack with fear. She signed. When it was Brandon's turn, his hand shook so badly he could barely hold the pen. Stephanie sat next to him, crying silent tears that ruined her makeup. After everyone had signed, I stood up to leave, but I had one more thing to say. You know what's interesting, I said. I actually wanted to test you. 6 months ago, Harold made a comment at a birthday party about how I should be more generous with family. It made me wonder, so I deliberately left my banking app open at Thanksgiving. I wanted to see what you'd do if you knew about the money. The shock on their faces was absolute. It was a trap, Martha said, almost smiling, and you all walked right into it. I needed to know the truth before I died, I said. I needed to know if you loved me, or just loved what I could give you. Now I know. I told them about the scholarships I'd already set up at my old school, $2 million that would fund full college education for children of cafeteria workers for the next 30 years, the $1 million it donated to women's shelters, the $500,000 in trust funds for my former co-workers' grandchildren, the $1 million invested in local small businesses owned by struggling families. I have $5 million set aside for my own retirement, I said. I'm going to travel, take classes, live fully. The rest is designated for charities. Real charities, not you. But we're your family, Stephanie whispered. No, I said. You were people related to me by blood and marriage who saw me as an ATM. Family loves unconditionally. You loved conditionally, and the condition was money. We left them sitting in their living room, stunned and defeated. As Martha, Gerald, and I walked to our cars, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Free. 3 months passed before the full consequences of their actions became clear. I'd moved out of my rental apartment into a small house I bought outright for $300,000. It had 2 bedrooms, a garden I'd always dreamed of, and a porch where I could drink my morning coffee in peace. For the first time in my life, I owned my own home. No landlord, no lease, just mine. Martha helped me settle in, and we spent weekends planting roses and vegetables in the garden. I joined a watercolor painting class at the community center. I took a cooking course. Ironically, learning to make things I'd never had time for when I was working. I traveled to Alaska with Martha on a cruise, seeing glaciers and whales. In the fall, we drove through New England to see the leaves change colors. I was living, really living. But the story of what happened to my family continued to unfold. Patricia never signed the no-contact agreement that day. She stormed out instead, refusing to acknowledge what she'd done. So Gerald followed through with option 1. He filed a police report about the attempted fraud and the conservatorship scheme. The police investigated. They found evidence of Patricia and her son's plans to defraud not just me, but other elderly family members too. It turned out this wasn't their first attempt at financial exploitation. Patricia's son had been targeting his grandmother on his father's side as well. Both Patricia and her son ended up facing legal troubles. Nothing major, but enough to make their lives difficult. Fines, legal fees, probation. Patricia called me 6 weeks after everything fell apart, her voice small and desperate. "Daisy, please. We need help with the lawyer fees. We made a mistake, but we're family." "You made your choices," I said calmly. "These are the consequences." I hung up. Martha, who was sitting across from me having tea, nodded approvingly. Harold took a different path. Head signed the agreement, and to his credit, he actually stuck to it. But more than that, he got help. Brittany had called me privately a month after the confrontation. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "I didn't know," she kept saying. "I swear I didn't know what my dad was doing. He told me you'd offered to help with school, and I believed him. I would never have been part of that." We met for coffee, just the 2 of us. Brittany was 24, bright and earnest, studying to become a doctor. When I showed her the evidence of what her father had done, she was horrified. "He's sick," she said finally. "The gambling, it's an addiction. He needs help." I agreed to pay for Harold's gambling addiction treatment, but anonymously through the court system. He never knew it was me. He went through a 90-day program, then continued with therapy and Gamblers Anonymous meetings. Brittany told me months later that he was doing better, facing his demons, trying to rebuild his life. But it was Brandon and Stephanie's situation that hurt the most, because it was my son. They'd signed the agreement. For 2 months, I heard nothing from them. Then the letters started arriving. Every week, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside was a handwritten letter from Brandon. At first, I couldn't read them. I'd throw them in a drawer, unable to face whatever excuses or manipulations they contained. But after the 10th letter, curiosity got the better of me. "Dear Mom," the first one read, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But I need you to know that I understand now what I did. Stephanie and I are in therapy, both separately and together. I'm learning things about myself I don't like. I've spent the last 15 years trying to keep up with people who have more money than me, and I lost sight of what actually matters. I lost sight of you. I'm so sorry." Each letter was similar: apologies, reflections, slow realizations. He wrote about his therapy sessions, about the moment he understood had been willing to betray his own mother for a bigger house. He wrote about fighting with Stephanie, about her own realizations, about how they'd both gotten caught in a trap of wanting more and more without ever being satisfied. By the 8th letter, he wrote, "Stephanie and I separated last month. We're not getting divorced, but we needed space. She's staying with her parents. She's in therapy too. Her therapist asked her why she felt entitled to your money, and she couldn't answer. She just cried for an hour. We broke something in ourselves, Mom, and I don't know if we can fix it." I didn't respond to any of the letters. I couldn't, not yet, but I read every one. The wider family fractured completely. Some relatives I barely knew reached out to apologize. saying they'd had no idea what was being planned. Others took Patricia's or Harold's side, insisting I was overreacting or being cruel. Holiday invitations stopped coming. The big Thanksgiving gathering didn't happen that year. Christmas was quiet. I spent it with Martha and her daughter's family, and it was the most peaceful holiday I'd had in years. But the best part, the part that made everything worth it, came in January. The first scholarship recipients were announced at my old school. I attended the ceremony, sitting in the back of the cafeteria where I'd worked for 32 years. 3 students, all children of cafeteria workers, received full 4-year college scholarships. The scholarship was named after Tom, my late husband, the Thomas Grant Memorial Scholarship for Children of Food Service Workers. The first recipient was a girl named Emma Rodriguez, whose mother worked the breakfast shift. Emma stood at the podium, tears running down her face, and said, "My mom has worked here for 18 years, making sure kids like me have food to eat. She always told me education was important, but we didn't know how we'd pay for college. This scholarship means I can become a teacher. I can give back. I can be like the person who gave me this chance." I sat in the back and cried. This was what money was for. Not boats or vacation homes or keeping up with neighbors. This, after the ceremony, Brittany found me in the hallway. I'd invited her to come, and she'd driven 3 hours from medical school to be there. "Thank you," she said, hugging me tight. "Thank you for showing me what generosity really looks like. Walk with me," I asked. We went to the garden behind the school. It was winter, so nothing was blooming, but the paths were still beautiful. "I want to tell you something," Brittany said. "I've changed my specialty focus. I'm studying geriatric psychiatry now." "What made you decide that? What happened with you and my dad?" "I want to help protect elderly people from financial exploitation. I want to make sure people like my dad get help before they hurt someone. I want to make sure people like you have advocates." She looked at me seriously. "You turned something horrible into purpose for me. That's a gift." We sat on a bench and talked for an hour. About her studies, about her father's progress, about her dreams, and I realized something important. Good could come from this pain. The family I'd lost wasn't really lost, because it had never been what I thought it was. But new family, chosen family, real family, that could be built. "I'd like to stay in touch," I told Brittany. "If you want to." "I'd love that," she said. We started meeting once a month for lunch. I became her mentor of sorts, and she became the grandchild I'd always wanted, the one who saw me as a person, not a bank account. Meanwhile, the letters from Brandon kept coming. Every single week. By March, there were 23 of them in my drawer. I still didn't know if I could forgive him, but I was starting to think I might be able to try. Spring came early that year, and with it, change. My garden exploded with color. The roses I'd planted bloomed in shades of pink and yellow and red. I had tomatoes growing in raised beds, herbs in containers on the porch, and a small patch of wildflowers that attracted butterflies and bees. Every morning, I'd wake up, make coffee, and sit on my porch watching the world come alive. Martha joined me most mornings. We'd become more than friends. We'd become sisters, the kind you choose rather than inherit. She helped me navigate this new life, this freedom I'd never quite known how to use. "You should travel more," she said one April morning. "You've got the money and the time. Where have you always wanted to go?" I thought about it. Ireland. Tom's grandmother was from County Cork. He always wanted to see it, but we never did. "Then go," Martha said simply. "Book a trip." So I did. 2 weeks in Ireland, driving the coast, seeing ancient castles and green hills that seemed to roll on forever. I scattered some of Tom's ashes there, in a place I'd never gotten to see but would have loved. And I cried, but they were good tears, healing tears. When I got back, there was a change in Brandon's letters. "Mom," this one read, "I've been in therapy for 7 months now. Stephanie and I are back together, but it's different. We're different. We sold the house. It was too big, too expensive, too much pressure. We bought a smaller place, 3 bedrooms, 1,500 square feet. It's enough, more than enough. The kids are adjusting. They don't need a mansion. They need parents who aren't stressed and fighting all the time. I got a second job on weekends to help pay down debt. Stephanie cut up her credit cards. We're learning to live within our means. I'm learning what you tried to teach me my whole life. I just wish Eid listened before I hurt you so badly. I read that letter 3 times, then I picked up the phone. Hello? Brandon answered on the first ring, his voice careful and uncertain. It's me, I said. Silence. Then, quietly, Mom, I've been reading your letters. I wasn't sure you were. I thought maybe you were throwing them away. I was, at first, I admitted. But then I started reading them, all of them. I understand if you never want to see me again, he said quickly. I know what I did was unforgivable. I just needed you to know that I'm trying to be better. Not for the inheritance, not for anything except because I hate who I was, who I became. I'd like to have dinner with you, I said. Just you and me, somewhere public, next week. Another silence. Really, really. We met at a small Italian restaurant on a Tuesday evening. Brandon looked different, thinner, older, but somehow more solid, more real. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. Thank you for giving me a chance, he said. We ordered food neither of us ate much of. We talked for 3 hours. He told me everything. How Stephanie had started comparing their life to her friends' lives. How Head felt inadequate, unable to provide the lifestyle she wanted. How the pressure had built until Head convinced himself that my money was somehow owed to them. How the therapy had forced him to confront his entitlement, his weakness, his betrayal. I was raised better than that, he said. You and Dad taught me about hard work and integrity, and I threw it all away because I wanted things I hadn't earned. Why did you stay silent? I asked. That day at Thanksgiving, when Stephanie said I should just give you money, you didn't defend me. He looked down at his untouched pasta. Because part of me agreed with her, and I'm so ashamed of that. I thought I deserved it because I was your son, like being born entitled me to your life's work. He met my eyes. I was wrong, so completely wrong. What changed? I asked. Losing you, he said simply. And the therapy. My therapist asked me to imagine if someone treated my kids the way I treated you, if someone tried to steal from them, manipulate them, declare them incompetent to take their money. I lost it. I started yelling about how Eid never let anyone hurt my children like that. And then she said, but you did that to your mother. And I just broke. We sat in silence for a while. I'm not ready to forgive you completely, I said finally, but am willing to try. Slowly. That's more than I deserve, Brandon said. Well, have dinner once a month, I told him. Here, in public. Well, talk. Well, see if we can rebuild trust. But if you pressure me for money even once, if Stephanie contacts me asking for anything, this stops immediately. Do you understand? Yes, completely. And you continue therapy. Both of you. We will. We are. Over the next few months, we had those dinners. Slowly, carefully, Brandon began telling me about his life in a way he never had before. Not the surface stuff, the house and the kids' achievements, but the real things. His fears, his regrets, his hopes for who he could become. In July, he brought up Stephanie. She wants to apologize to you, in person, but only if you're ready. Not yet. We sat in silence for a while. I'm not ready to forgive you completely, I said finally. But am willing to try. Slowly. That's more than I deserve, Brandon said. Well, have dinner once a month. I told him. Here, in public. Well, talk. Well, see if we can rebuild trust. But if you pressure me for money even once, if Stephanie contacts me asking for anything, this stops immediately. Do you understand? Yes, completely. And you continue therapy. Both of you. We will. We are. Over the next few months, we had those dinners. Slowly, carefully, Brandon began telling me about his life in a way he never had before. Not the surface stuff, the house, and the kids' achievements, but the real things. His fears, his regrets, his hopes for who he could become. In July, he brought up Stephanie. She wants to apologize to you, in person, but only if you're ready. Not yet. I'd made friends in my neighborhood. joined a book club, volunteered at 3 different charities. My garden had gone through a full cycle of seasons. My life was full in ways it had never been when I was working 12-hour days in a school cafeteria. At my book club meeting, a woman named Carol shared that her adult children were pressuring her to take out a reverse mortgage so she could help them with their debts. She was crying, confused, not sure what to do. I found myself telling my story. Not all of it, but enough. The pressure, the manipulation, the way family can sometimes be the ones who hurt you most, and how I'd protected myself. You don't owe them your financial security, I said. Love doesn't come with a price tag. After the meeting, 3 other women came up to me. They all had similar stories. Family members who saw them as sources of money rather than people. We exchanged phone numbers. We formed our own little support group. I realized that what had happened to me wasn't unique, it was common, and my willingness to talk about it, to be open about family greed and financial exploitation, was helping others. In November, I got a call from Brandon. "Mom, it's Thanksgiving next week. I know we haven't done family holidays in a year, but I wanted you to know that Stephanie and I would like to have you over. Just us and the kids. No one else, a small dinner. And I promise, no discussions about money, no pressure, just family." I thought about it for a long time. "I'll come," I said finally. "But I'm bringing Martha." "Of course," Brandon said. We'd love to see her. That Thanksgiving was nothing like the year before. We ate in their smaller house, around a table that barely fit everyone. The kids had grown, and they were polite and sweet. Stephanie was quiet, almost shy around me, but Shed clearly changed too. The hard edge was gone. After dinner, Stephanie asked if she could speak to me privately. We went out onto their small back porch. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice shaking. "A real one, not an excuse or explanation. What I did was wrong. I looked at you and saw dollar signs instead of a person. I saw you as a means to an end, a way to get what I wanted, and am horrified by who I was. I've been in therapy for a year now, and am learning about entitlement and materialism, and all the ways I was taught that my worth came from what I owned. I'm teaching my kids different values now. Hard work, gratitude, contentment. Things you tried to show me, but I was too blind to see." "Why?" I asked. "Why did you do it?" "Because I thought I deserved more," she said honestly. "I thought I deserved an easy life, a big house, luxury. I thought I'd married Brandon expecting his family to provide that, and when they didn't, I felt cheated. But I was the problem, not you. You didn't owe me anything." We stood there in the November cold, and I felt something shift. "Thank you for being honest," I said. "Can you ever forgive me?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. "Someday. But like with Brandon, it's going to take time." She nodded, wiping tears from her eyes. "Time is fair, more than fair." When Martha and I left that night, Brandon walked us to our car. "Thank you for coming," he said. "It meant everything." "Keep working on yourself," I told him. "Keep being honest, that's all I ask." Driving home, Martha said, "You're doing something remarkable, you know." "What's that?" "You're teaching them that actions have consequences, but also that people can change. You're not enabling them, but you're not destroying them either. You're giving them space to grow." I thought about that. Maybe that was the lesson. Not revenge, not destruction, but accountability with compassion, justice with mercy. That was what Tom would have wanted. That was who I wanted to be. 1 year after that second Thanksgiving, I got a call from Brandon asking if we could meet for coffee. We'd been having our monthly dinners consistently, and our relationship had slowly, carefully begun to heal. But this felt different, more important. We met at the same coffee shop where everything had begun to change. It was a cold December afternoon, and the place smelled like cinnamon and coffee beans. Brandon looked nervous. He ordered us both coffee, and we sat by the window watching people hurry past in their winter coats. "I've been in therapy for almost 2 years now," he said. "Individual therapy, couples therapy with Stephanie, even family therapy with the kids." "How's that going?" I asked. "Hard," he admitted, "but good. I'm learning things about myself I never understood, like why I felt so much pressure to provide a certain lifestyle. My therapist thinks it comes from growing up lower middle class, watching my friends have things we couldn't afford. I developed this belief that financial success equals worth. And when I found out you had money, all those old feelings came rushing back. Like if you had it and weren't sharing it, that meant I wasn't worth it. He paused, stirring sugar into his coffee he probably didn't need. But that was never about you. That was about my own insecurity. You didn't owe me anything. You never did. He looked up, his eyes sincere. I don't expect you to forgive me, Mom. I just needed you to know that I finally understand what I did. I betrayed you. I chose money over our relationship. I was willing to have you declared incompetent to get what I wanted. There's no excuse for that. I sipped my coffee, thinking about how to respond. 2 years ago, these words would have felt impossible. Now, they were necessary. Tell me about your life now, I said. Really tell me. So he did. He talked about downsizing, about learning to live within their means, about teaching his kids the difference between wants and needs, about him and Stephanie going to garage sales and thrift stores, the same ones I'd shopped at for decades, about cooking meals at home instead of eating out, about paying off debt, slowly, painfully, but steadily. We have a budget now, he said. Stephanie tracks every penny. The kids get allowances and have to save for things they want. We're teaching them what you tried to teach me, that wealth isn't about how much you have, it's about how you manage what you've got. And Stephanie? I asked. She's different, really different. She quit her real estate job because she said it was feeding her materialism, always looking at houses she couldn't afford. She works at a nonprofit now, helping low-income families find housing. The pay is less, but she says it's more fulfilling. She comes home and talks about the families she helped, not the commission she lost. I studied my son's face. He looked older, but also more at peace. The anxiety that used to live in his eyes had faded. I'm proud of you, I said quietly. He looked startled. You are. You made terrible choices. You hurt me deeply. But you're taking responsibility. You're changing. That takes courage. It shouldn't have taken losing you to make me see, he said. No, I agreed. But sometimes that's how people learn. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then I told him about my life, about the scholarships I'd funded, now in their second year, about the small businesses I'd invested in, 3 of which were thriving, about my travels with Martha and the watercolor paintings I'd started selling at a local art fair, about Brittany and her work in geriatric psychiatry and how she was building a career around protecting elderly people from exactly what had happened to me. She told me about that, Brandon said. She called me last month. She said I needed to hear from someone other than you how much I hurt you. It was a hard conversation. Good, I said. You needed to hear it. Mom, he said, his voice tentative. I know I don't have the right to ask this, but would you consider having a relationship with your grandchildren? They miss you. They ask about you all the time, and I want them to know the real you, not the version they've gotten through my filtered guilt and shame. I thought about it. Start slowly. Maybe we can meet at a park, neutral ground. Thank you, he breathed. Over the next 6 months, I did get to know my grandchildren again. 8-year-old Amy and 10-year-old Christopher. They were good kids, surprisingly unspoiled, despite the lifestyle they'd been living. Brandon and Stephanie had made real changes, and it showed in their children. Amy told me one day, while we were feeding ducks at the pond, Daddy says you're really smart about money. Can you teach me? So I did. I taught both kids about saving, about compound interest, about the difference between assets and liabilities. I taught them about working hard and living below your means. I taught them what Tom had taught me 40 years ago. You're giving them a better inheritance than money, Brandon said after one of these lessons. You're giving them wisdom. In June, Brittany graduated with her medical degree. I attended the ceremony and cried watching her walk across that stage. Afterward, she hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you for believing in me, for showing me what real family looks like." That summer, Patricia reached out through Harold. She wanted to apologize, he said. Shed hit rock bottom, gotten help, and was trying to make amends as part of her recovery program. I agreed to meet her at a neutral location. She looked older, worn down by consequences, But there was humility in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I was wrong," she said simply. "I was greedy and cruel. I justified it by telling myself you didn't need the money. But the truth is, I just wanted it. And I'm sorry. I accept your apology," I said. "But I'm not ready to have you back in my life." She nodded. "I understand. I just needed you to know I'm ashamed of what I did. It wasn't a happy reunion. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was acknowledgement. And sometimes, that's enough." By the time the third anniversary of that Thanksgiving rolled around, my life looked nothing like it had before. I'd traveled to 7 countries. I'd donated over $6 million to causes I believed in. I'd mentored 12 elderly people through financial exploitation situations. I'd sold 32 watercolor paintings. I'd written a blog about financial independence in retirement that had 10,000 followers. And I'd rebuilt a careful, boundaried relationship with my son. On that third Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner at my house for the first time. Brandon, Stephanie, and the kids came. So did Martha and her family. Brittany drove in from the hospital where she was doing her residency. We squeezed around my dining room table, elbows touching, passing dishes and laughing. Before we ate, Brandon asked if he could say something. 3 years ago, I was the worst version of myself, he said, looking around the table. I hurt the most important person in my life because I was greedy and stupid. Mom, you had every right to never speak to me again. But you gave me a chance to grow, to change, to become someone worthy of your love. You taught me that real wealth isn't in a bank account. It's in integrity, in relationships, in living according to your values." He raised his glass. "To Mom, the richest person I know." Everyone raised their glasses, but I had to speak. "I want to tell you all something," I said. 3 years ago, when Brittany saw my bank account balance, I could have lied. I could have said it was a mistake, or not answered. But I didn't, because I needed to know the truth. I needed to know if I was loved for who I was, or for what I had. I looked at Brandon and Stephanie. The answer hurt, but it was also necessary, because it showed me who I really was too. I was someone who'd spent her whole life making herself small, acceptable, undemanding. I worked hard, saved money, and never asked for anything, and I let people treat me like that was all I was. Just the lunch lady, just the quiet one, just simple Daisy. I stood up, feeling the weight of my years and my choices and my hard-won wisdom. But I'm not simple, impatient, I'm strategic, I'm disciplined. I understand compound interest and human nature and my own worth. I spent 32 years feeding children, making sure hungry kids had food in their bellies, and someone who smiled at them in the lunch line. That mattered. I mattered, not because of my bank account, but because of who I was. When my family tried to take my money, they thought they were dealing with someone too stupid or too old to fight back. They were wrong. I tested them, and they failed. But in failing, they showed me the truth. And the truth, even when it hurts, is better than a comfortable lie. I looked at everyone at the table, these people I'd chosen to share my life with. Money reveals character. It doesn't create it. I was rich long before I had millions because I had self-respect. You were poor, Brandon, the moment you decided my worth was in my bank account. But you're richer now, even with less money, because you've learned the difference. Family is built on love and respect, not transactions. I tested you because I needed to know if I was loved or just useful. You failed that test, but you learned from it, and that's what makes this meal possible. I raised my own glass, to truth, to growth, to second chances earned through real change, and to knowing your worth before someone tries to price you. We ate and laughed and told stories. The kids played in the living room after dinner. Martha and I cleaned up, while Stephanie and Brittany talked about healthcare advocacy. Brandon helped the kids with a puzzle. It was normal. It was beautiful. It was real. Later, after everyone left, I stood in my garden under the stars. I thought about Tom and how proud he'd be. I thought about the $17 million that had both revealed and healed so much. I thought about the scholarships that would help hundreds of kids over the coming decades. I thought about the life it'd built, finally, at 66 years old. They'd called me the simple school cook, And they were right in a way. I was simple. Simple meant honest. Simple meant clear. Simple meant uncomplicated by greed. Eid fed children's bodies for 32 years. But Eid also fed their souls with dignity and care. My $17 million didn't define me. My response to their greed did. I chose to be generous on my own terms, to people who didn't demand it. I chose to protect myself without becoming bitter. I chose to test the people I loved, because truth matters more than comfort. And I chose to live freely, finally, after a lifetime of discipline. The richest life is one lived with integrity. I'm 66 years old, and I'm just beginning to truly live. That's the real treasure. Now, I have a question for you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who saw you as a resource rather than a person? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's facing a similar situation. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories and know they're not alone. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future stories about real people facing real challenges. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about knowing their worth, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope it gave you something to think about, or maybe even some courage to stand up for yourself when you need to. Remember, know your worth before someone tries to price you. Build your wealth slowly. Protect it fiercely. Share it wisely. And always remember that the people who truly love you will never see you as a transaction. May you find the courage to live authentically, the wisdom to protect yourself, and the grace to offer second chances when they're earned. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.